there's a couple of types of memory hole. People have called them collective amnesia or social amnesia or collective forgetting. The Roman Empire, like they would chisel off the names of old emperors. They
Not subtle, but yeah, it's effective.
There was another one, like the dad was the emperor, and then he appointed his two sons to be like junior emperors, and then they became the emperors. One son killed the other one and said, if you mention his name again, you get death. I was just like, I'm not mentioning his name. No. Don't do it.
But that's clear. It's unambiguous. There's an instrument, a mechanism, and it's understood.
And there's a long history. Yeah, the Soviets did it by airbrushing people out of the photos. Here's Stalin with his 3 mates, 2 mates, 1 mate. Oh, it's just Stalin.
Solo portrait of Stalin.
So in the very final year of World War I, somewhere between 17 and 100 million people died of the flu.
Fuck me, that's a lot.
So we just had a terrible war. And then suddenly Spanish flu, as it came to be known, kicked off. 1918, 1919, we don't know the exact numbers. Could be 17 million, could be 100 million. But guaranteed, this was the third worst pandemic of the last 1,000 years. And that list includes the Black Death. The other one was colonization of South America, where they brought all those diseases and everyone died.
It was like a conglomerate of
It was the every die.
Multi-demic.
Every die. Yeah. So maybe up to 5% of the world's population died in this short period. Like it's literally a 6-month period.
Glad the war's over.
And I've mentioned this before, but the really weird thing is as soon as it happened, 100 million people died, 5% of the world's population. We put the whole thing into the memory hole. We just went, you know what? I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to think about that. I'm not going to write about that. It just kind of didn't happen. And, you know, there's actually concrete evidence about this. I looked at Google Ngrams, where you can look at different things and talk about how much people talk about something over time. And it's like, no one talked, like literally no one talked about it until 1960s. There's a bit of a blip, and maybe in 2000, people really started talking about the Spanish flu.
So you're saying immediately after the Spanish flu was over, no one on the internet was talking about it?
No, that's true. No one on the internet or in books or in newspapers or in anything.
Right.
And it just suddenly you have 100 million people die, everyone just choosing not to talk about it, And of course that's weird to think, why would we suddenly not talk about things? But then a little bit of me got me wondering that we've just been through a pandemic. We've just been through not the same level of experience, but similar. And I've been wondering, are we putting COVID-19 in the memory hole? Welcome to The Wholesome Show, the podcast that dives into the memory hole for you.
I brought my snorkel.
I'm Will Grant.
I'm Rod Lambert. I just have to, correct you on one thing. We haven't just had the COVID pandemic. Still in it.
Oh.
Have you forgotten?
Oh.
Have you forgotten?
Maybe. Maybe some people have. Maybe I'm one of them.
You're pre-holing while in the hole. That's very meta-hole.
No, this is my question. When do we decide to collectively forget about something?
And how too? Like how do we agree?
Yeah. I went and did some research and I've had a look at, what might be going on here. I got some examples and I got some ideas about what's happening. It's not 100% concrete yet, but
concrete, that's for other people.
So the first one I just wanted to go is the name memory hole.
Is that yours?
No, it's not. People have been using the term memory hole for things that we forget. But do you know where it comes from?
It's the internet.
No, 1984. So not the year 1984, the book 1984.
Really?
The main guy, Winston Smith, he works for the government propaganda department and
the Ministry of Truth.
The Ministry of Truth, yeah. And their job was either to put out the truth or to get rid of the not truth. And so his job, there's a nice example. The weekly chocolate ration was decreased from 30 grams to 20 grams. And the next day, the newspaper announced that the chocolate ration had not been reduced to 20 grams, but increased to 20 grams. And then the day after, they were like, any mention of the 30 grams is being deleted. And so his job was to memory hole that.
He actually literally dug memory holes all day.
he literally went around and he'd find any mention of this in any documents or whatever.
And they called it memory hole in the book.
And in his desk, like next to his desk, he would have like a little incinerator furnace that they called the memory hole. You just poke a fact in there and down it goes into the memory hole.
Damn.
And I like this. I mean, because it's very 1984 where we're thinking about all these kinds of things, but to just put it in the memory hole of we destroy this bit of.
I'm torn. Whenever I think of that story, read it, watch it, whatever, I'm so torn because part of me goes, if you're going to bother, do it like that. Like just quadruple down.
Go.
But it also just, I get deep sort of, existential horror at the idea that it's not impossible to go there.
But it's not. It's actually not that far off other totalitarian societies.
No,
but there's things like Cambodia in the Khmer Rouge. They started in a year zero. They said we have no history before this, and that's not far from Big Brother.
That's like a memory
this idea of you just go no.
And any mention of that will be severely, let's say, reprimanded.
So there's a couple of types of the sort of memory hole. People have called them collective amnesia or social amnesia or collective forgetting. Now, what I don't want to explore is the Khmer Rouge sort of deliberate erasure.
Good.
Plenty of examples of that. And there's cool examples.
But it's kind of less interesting. The mechanisms of it are less interesting.
No, totally. Yeah. Like you've got like the Roman Empire, like they would chisel off the names of old emperors. They
not subtle, but yeah, it's effective.
There was another one, like the dad was the emperor, and then he appointed his two sons to be like junior emperors, and then they became the emperors. And then one son killed the other one and said, if you mention his name again, you get death. I was just like,
but again, like
I'm not mentioning his name.
No.
Don't do it.
You got too much to live for. But that's clear. It's unambiguous. There's an instrument, a mechanism, and it's understood.
And there's a long history. Yeah, the Soviets did it by airbrushing people out of the photos. Here's Stalin with his 3 mates, 2 mates, 1 mate. Oh, it's just Stalin.
Solo portrait of Stalin.
Or there's
that's horrifying.
There's other sorts of things where a Chinese museum that it's like a history of China museum. It's like 2 million square feet, one of the biggest museums in China.
And getting smaller every year?
No, it's got like one photo on the whole Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward. Like you can imagine a giant office block size thing, history of the Chinese people, and this thing where millions of people died. It gets one photo, which is, we acknowledge it and just go.
Yeah, we're not monsters. Like, come on.
It's there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is a long history of this sort of deliberate erasure, and that's terrible, but not what I wanted to explore. No. I want to know, what is it when people sort of go, all right, let's just forget about
what?
We'll forget about.
Do you remember when? No, not really.
So, I mean, the first thing is thinking, well, can we find examples of this? So we've got the Spanish flu is a pretty
That must have
been
difficult given we've forgotten.
That's the challenge. It's actually kind of hard to find examples, and I'd love to, if you can think of any. And listener, send them in later. I mean, it's really interesting. I started with the Spanish flu, and I looked on Google Ngrams. Google Ngrams is a site where it shows how much people mention it in books. So it's not perfect, but it's something to say. Every year you can track it, and no one's talking about it until the 60s, and then 2000 suddenly it really takes off.
So it's not only memory holes, it's memory exhumations.
Yeah, like it disappears.
Okay.
But I got our programmer, astrophysicist friend Brad Tucker, and said, buddy, can you find any of these? And he went and shoved a whole bunch of.
You got the boys in the lab on it.
I got the boys in the lab onto it. I said, can you find me some examples? And so he went and I looked, and there's a few potentials that I found, and I'm not sure if they're true or not.
Okay.
There's a weird effect, the Black Death. Now, we know the Black Death.
Yeah.
But there may have been a period in like the 1700s, 1800s. You can look at this. We talk about it now, a certain amount. But in the 1700s and 1800s, they didn't talk about it.
I mean, honestly, were they just sick of it? There's other things to think about, like this amazing new invention about how to feed horses?
Might be. I'll come to that in a bit.
Yeah.
But that's a possible example. There's the English Civil War.
This is where I say, the what?
Yeah. Like they might have, same sort of period, they might have not talked about it for ages, and then it became more common to talk about it in the 20th century.
Was that a specific war between two bits of England? I thought England was always in little bits until it became one bit.
The Bloods and the Cribs, I think.
That's right.
I think
And then someone brought in a ninja stars, and it tipped the balance of power.
No, it's people with bad haircuts versus people with good haircuts. was the centerpiece.
Much like us.
The centerpiece of the English Civil War, I think.
I honestly don't remember something being called the English Civil War. I'm an example. I've been memory holed.
You've been memory hole. I found a couple of others. Potentially the Irish potato famine. Now, remember, these are things that we might know about now, but there were periods where people went, I don't want to talk about that.
Whatever.
I don't want to talk about that. The mutiny in India. These are just things I found. This was a rebellion in 1857 where a lot of people were like, fuck off, British. And
that went well?
The British said, we'll fuck off by being more here.
Yeah. What if we don't?
So
we decided no.
There's a couple of others that I found that people actually talked about. Like there's this German literature writer, he writes literature. He reckons people don't talk about the Allied bombing of Germany very much. 600,000 people died.
Do you know what? I don't think that's untrue.
And maybe.
Because when you say it, like there's a new series out, Apple TV, I think, Masters of the Air.
Uh-huh.
So it's a reimagining, very glamorous looking World War II flyboys, Americans flying from England into Germany, etc. But whenever I've seen it, and I kind of get a little bit obsessed with war movies at times, you don't see a lot of that. It's true. Like you kind of go, oh yeah, here we are fighting Jerry, but you don't go into it at all.
And well, it was
much like, what was it like for the Japanese in Japan during World War II?
Could be.
It's very hard to find, comparatively speaking, English versions of stories about that.
And there might well be a chunk of, all right, so we lost and so we don't get to tell those stories. But the thing about the Allied bombing, it was like 600,000 civilians died. Like this was just carpet bombing of German towns. And I, of course, it's total war. And in some sense, the civilians are supporting the war machine or whatever. But it's like, it's targeting towns. It's
these are not military targets.
They are not. And it's 600,000 people, which is a pretty classic definition of mass death. And people in Germany don't talk about it.
But it could also be the classic thing, to the victors write the history or whatever it is. History is written by the winners.
So
we beat the Black Death, therefore we don't talk about it.
That might be it. Yeah. The final one I found, which is a very different one, was from the podcast Search Engine, where they were describing cockroaches, that in the 70s and 80s, houses would be chock-a-block with cockroaches.
Yeah.
And then we fixed it. And we don't even talk about it or know about it or think about it. We've just forgotten.
Is that what happened? Because I've always been amazed that people get so upset about cockroaches. I'm like, well, they're around. But
did you have cockroaches in your house as a kid? Like a lot?
Not really.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I'm like, why are people so hysterical about it? And maybe this is it, though. There were the places where they really were a thing.
But I can imagine if you fixed a problem and you can't see it anymore, then you don't notice it. You sort of...
Kind of by definition.
So these are some examples. And as I said, listener, please send in more because I'm really interested to find what are things that we've collectively forgot. I think we can point to the Spanish flu as being a pretty clear one. These others, I don't know. Yeah, there's a variety of ways of finding it, but I think there's actually, and not erased, they're just things that we've decided to...
We just let them dissolve?
Let them dissolve or disappear.
Have we? I suppose we're kind of doing it with COVID. Actually, no, not kind of. We are doing it with COVID.
I think we are. So there's a couple of papers that I've been looking at that give some explanation of what's going on.
Yeah.
And let's try and fit them to the examples and see if there is a thing and if it's happening with COVID or not.
Thinking time.
All right. So a couple of papers, I just wanted to shout them out. So this is Building a Collective Memory, The Case for Collective Forgetting by William Hurst and Alan Coman, Collective Memory and Forgetting by Cindy Minar-Manyak, and The Rising of Collective Forgetting and Cultural Selectivity by Christian Candia and Brian Utsi. They got some ideas.
I'm glad you mentioned them. They're the ones I was going to suggest.
Well, they've got some ideas about this. So the thing about collective memory is it's not like individual memory.
Yeah.
So, of course, we have our individual memories of whatever. We keep them in their head and they're real or manufactured or whatever. But collective memory is more something that we share with each other. And so it requires communication. Like it doesn't happen if
it needs to keep circulating. Otherwise it
needs to keep
evaporates,
circulating.
Right? Yeah.
We've got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Or we've got to write it down in books or write it down in newspaper articles. We've got to make movies about it or make statues about it, anything that keeps it going. And so there's a chunk of things that suggest, okay, maybe the reason we might have forgotten the Spanish flu is a little bit about both the communication and the not shared memory of it.
Coldplay didn't write a song about it, therefore it didn't stay in our minds.
If they had done, then finally we would have known.
I found that, like, related to that. There's this song I remember, it's kind of this lame, boring 70s song that I never used to understand why people cared, like The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It's this droning kind of song, but I heard it repeatedly in my youth,
And now you need to know it.
Well, one day I was reading about something else, and that is about this boat that exploded in one of the Great Lakes in America, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, and that's where that famous song came from. And I thought, what the fuck?
Do you know,
This is a big boat disaster.
We did an episode a little while ago about Wittenoom. We did a couple of episodes actually, an asbestos mining town in Western Australia. And as I was thinking about that episode over and over again, the Midnight Oil song.
Yeah. Blue Sky Mining.
Blue Sky Mining.
Yep.
That stuck in my head. And it really does say collective memory does require us talking about it and communicating. And,
reinforcement, like all good memories.
So there is one.
Yep.
There is one. A good memory requires reinforcement in your own head. And so if you remember something, you probably actually, there's a reason that you're remembering it. So either it's a concrete fact, how do I get to work, or it's a concrete memory, how did I meet my partner or something like that.
Or it's useful, like if I remember this, it'll get me late.
It's useful. Yep. And so, well, come to useful in a sec, but it is like there's a component where collective memories have to have some sort of thing where we're rehearsing it out in public.
Yeah.
Whether it's a song or a movie, we've got to be saying it. And it's probably because it's useful to talk about it. There's a couple of other things. We naturally pay selective attention to different things, and our selective attention makes us forget other things.
You got to nudge something out to nudge something in, kind of thing.
It's almost like there is a limit on how much we can remember. There's a study that people were looking at this, and it's called, well, first they did a study within individual people, so looking at your own memories.
Yeah.
You give people a list and say, practice the list, and I want you to remember these components of the list, but not everything. Then they become much more likely to forget those other bits, even to the point where you go back and so the list has 10 items and say, I want you to remember the first, second, and fifth item or something like that. People forget the rest of the items more than if they were just randomly
extremely focused on the task.
They become more focused and forget the others.
Yeah.
And it happens socially as well. Like if you're let's talk about items 1, 3, and 5 or something like that, focus on them. Everyone forgets the other ones. So there's sort of an effect where we focus more on the effects that's happening, and then we forget other things. So potentially could be that as well.
Were you going to bring up something you told me years ago about what olden time villages sometimes used to do if they really wanted everyone to remember an event?
This is the idea of inducing trauma to get people to remember something. And the classic was, you have a court case and you get the 8-year-old kid to watch the court case and then you chuck them in the river afterwards.
Let them half drown.
And so they remember the whole day like it's chiseled into their brain.
I'm guessing when people weren't as literate as they are now, like at least someone in the village will now have a strong connection to that day.
Look, I don't doubt that that's plausible.
Why is he shaking in a corner? Oh, he remembers that court case.
So I guess the point is that's a useful memory for the town.
Yeah.
And it's
not great for the kid.
It's strongly wired into the kid. Yeah. And it still comes back to, so the question I want to think is, what are the components then of the Spanish flu that might have made us forget it? And what are the components that might be having in COVID now? There's some that says collectively, there's not much point in talking about it. Like I think after
it's
the
true.
Spanish flu,
what more bang for buck is there if we keep talking about how bad COVID was 2 years ago?
Absolutely.
What do we get out of it?
And you magnify that with Spanish flu.
Yeah.
So what would they be saying? 1922, 1923?
That was a bit shit.
Well, what are they going to say?
Yeah.
So there's lack of utility to talking about some of these things. Yeah. And maybe we're going through that with COVID as well. Yeah. The second one is we're not doing the cultural memory. And you can imagine, come after World War I, everyone's like, statues to the soldiers. Cool, let's do all of the statues to the soldiers. But they didn't do any statues to the people that died of Spanish flu. They didn't do any
Ooh, bad statues.
But
there's two children lying in bed dying.
Well,
let's put it outside this mall.
But then think about that. As we emerge from COVID, A, less point in talking about it, and B, are there any statues, any recognition?
What do you think? What should it be? A giant syringe?
Cookers. I don't know what it should be.
Cookers. A bunch of rednecks with big trucks.
But no one wants
vaccine.
to do it. No one is saying we should memorialize the fact that...
Well, it's not heroic, is it? It's not like we united against COVID because we had some kind of righteous cause. Like it was inflicted upon us. There was no specific enemy, so to speak. was no specific undertrodden and overtreaders. So it's like, what do you memorialise other than deaths?
And so the final bit is a narrative template. And it's interesting when we say a narrative template, things are easier to remember when they fit into a narrative, simple and, but, therefore, or you could go, there's a hero and they're doing their duty or something. And coming off World War I, there's narrative everywhere. We fought the baddie, we won against the baddie, that kind of thing. Yeah. Spanish flu, they're like,
a lot of people got really sick.
A lot of people died. It sucked. There's no narrative, and there's no use for talking about it at all. I think it's going to be weird.
Yeah, I reckon you're right.
I feel like COVID-19, it went for longer. It didn't kill as many people as the Spanish flu.
Yeah,
it sucked.
It was wildly disruptive.
It sucked for all of us. But you can imagine post all of this, what is the thing that we say to each other about it? We might say during the lockdown I did this or whatever, but are we really going to focus on it that much?
I'm going to say probably not.
Walter Benjamin argued that silences about public horrors can permit human societies to cope with collective recovery and go on to progress. And
Walter Benjamin's the lawnmower manufacturer.
Yes, and famous critic and
that's
person.
what I meant.
Yeah. But I think the thing that's going on here is it's not useful to talk about. It doesn't gain us anything in terms of pushing an identity or building relationships.
Yep.
It's not useful to publicly memorialise. Like no one is saying we should do these things. And it's actually probably beneficial for us all to forget. But doesn't that feel wrong?
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel wrong that we're going to forget everything?
It feels wrong and right. I mean, like, there's a big part of me that, like, when you first started talking about this, I was like, this is outrageous. And then I thought, but why? It's not like we said, ha, suck shit, people died. Or, fuck you, your economy crashed, that's hilarious. We're not saying poo-poo, we're just saying like, what do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do?
What do you want me to do with that? Yeah, it happened, it was shit. Hope it doesn't happen again. The only thing I see is people going, we must keep the memory alive so it doesn't happen again. I'm like, I've got news for you. It'll happen again.
It'll happen again.
And we will.
No matter what. And that's the thing that sucks.
Yep.
We'll remember this in the sense of you got to do some science and you got to do your microbiology. You got to do your virology and your immunization.
Yep.
It will happen again.
When the next one happens, you will go back 10 years after that and look at the engram spike on COVID-19.
Right back into the memory hole.
Where we belong.
No, we don't. We don't belong in the memory hole.
What have you been looking at other things this week?
Oh, yeah.
What have you been pondering? What have you been looking at other things we might talk about one day?
Australia's like, submarines, freaking great.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
But you know what is undersung about submarines is their history
and their ability to fly
and potential future as a cargo vessel.
Really?
Yes. There are people out there who reckon we can do some submarine cargo vesseling. There are also people, heroes. No, not heroes because they supported the baddies, who did a bunch of submarine cargo vesseling a long time ago. I'll tell you that story if you're interested.
Smuggling, right? I mean, like...
Okay, there's smugglers, yes, and also wartime moving people.
Yeah, but it's not like you get on Amazon, they say, would you like a pickup, car delivery, aeroplane, or submarine?
Do you know if it said, okay, there's a limit to how much I'll pay for this, but I would love...
Not the first time
if my shit
your wife would get home and go, $8,000 for a book, but it came by submarine. It came by submarine. That's not even wet. All right, here's one that I came across. We may have done an episode on this, but I can't remember. Memory hole. Retroactive precognition. Does this ring a bell?
No. Yes.
Bottom line gist was
my brain's got to go slowly through retroactive
precognition. It makes sense.
Isn't that just present thinking?
Yeah, it's like now. You mean now? Does this mean now? No, it's this idea that these people did some research where they got people to do like memory tests or a particular skills-based test you had to learn. They got people to do these tests, and then a period of time later, they trained them how to do this stuff or got them to memorize the things before, like after the fact, and they went back and looked at the results, and it turned out the people who trained in it afterwards did better beforehand than the people who hadn't trained in it afterwards.
What?
So they were saying the thing they did in the future made them better at doing the thing in the past.
No, it didn't. It didn't.
That's what they say.
It didn't.
They say.
It didn't. Science doesn't work. Time doesn't work like that.
Maybe it does. Retroactive precognition.
Oh, I like that. That's interesting. Okay. Rage farming. And
I really heard farting then.
Rage farming.
I'm so angry.
No, rage farming.
Rage farming.
And
I'm fucking angry. I'm going to put some corn in.
No, not like that. Not fucking angry. I'm going to put the corn in, and not. Well, it's like farmers grow things, corn, cows, whatever. There are people out there whose job really is to rage farm, to grow rage, to grow people, to make people angry. And
not
to
raging while farming,
and it's a way of thinking about social media, to think, okay, actually what you're doing is producing rage. Rage is like, well, that's the number one emotion because it is one of the most productive emotions. And if we can stimulate that, we can get some eyeballs.
Can we get a job in that?
We're trying, but not rage, because we're lovers. We're lovers. We're like hippies. We're like the hippies that are doing boutique joy farming. Is it joy? What do you get out of this, listener?
Modern stowaways. I was looking at that.
Oh, that's going to make me sad.
No, they're not all bad. That's the thing. People who stow away on boats, trains, and even planes, and they don't all die. Some of them actually...
They don't all die?
Some of them actually stow away and survive somehow.
Oh.
Because whenever I hear the word stowaway, I think, Cabin Boy Jim. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're like, come up here.
You want some treasure?
Here's Roger the cabin boy. Oh no, that's what I was doing.
First, you gotta be my peg leg.
Exactly.
You stand there and you hold my stump, and I'll walk around.
Exactly.
And you're like,
therefore, your passage is paid. Nearly.
Stowaways.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Don't be sad. It's
All right. There's a long history of this, and I don't know how far it's going to go back. So this is of politicians eating and drinking things to demonstrate that they're safe.
Oh fuck yeah.
Most recently, there was people in Flint, Michigan. Hey, the water. No, it wasn't even. It's after Flint, Michigan. Wherever it was, water's safe. I'll have a drink. My favorite example is during the mad cow crisis in the UK, where not only the Minister for Agriculture, but he got his 4-year-old daughter to eat the burger as well.
Yeah, she's dead now.
She is not dead.
No.
But there's a long history of politicians going, yep, it's safe. Yum, 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 yum.
Look, my kid's eating it. You fucking monster.
You monster.
You monster.
You monster. And I would just like to go through and see what all of the examples are, because, the narrow set that I've got, I don't think that's even everything.
I bet it isn't. The only other one I was rummaging around with, because it's close to my heart, when bureaucracy is actually good.
All the time.
Good bureaucracy. Helpful, progressive, useful bureaucracy.
All the time.
Some of the time.
Listener, send them in. We want to know what you want to explore, or if you have comments or suggestions for any of those, or other ideas for things we've memory hold, or other politicians that ate some dumb stuff. Ooh. Send them in.
Cheers at wholesomeshow.com,
or in a comment under there.
You've been very attractive listeners.
Most beautiful listeners ever.
We can hear your ears.
Do you know people can
hear other people's ears?
No, but we can be identified by the sound in our ear holes.
What?
I'll tell you about that one day.